Welcome to Radical Listening, the Portland podcast where we talk to local artists about their work. I'm Phil Johnson.
And I'm your co-host, Clifton Holtznagel.
Today we talk to Sara Fay Goldman. She is an aerial artist and theater performer in Portland. It was a really interesting conversation. We talked a little bit about her work with Fuse.
Yeah, we talked with her about her work with Fuse Theater Company and their new space Fusebox, where they've been producing some work and been able to stream online content from there as well. They just got the space recently, and now it's become a really good multi-purpose space for them, and they're figuring out how to, navigate the online art world like the rest of us, and it was really interesting to hear about that.
Yeah, it was great. And we talked a little bit about the role of social media and streaming for theater performances and performers. And it was just an overall good conversation. I think you guys will really enjoy hearing a different point of view from the performance world. It's not... we talk about theater a little bit, but mostly we talk about rope arts and aerial and just, how to make work online and release work online. So enjoy the show.
As always, you can find this episode and all episodes of Radical Listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all sorts of other places where you can find wonderful podcasts. Today on the show, we have Sara Fay Goldman, a performer, actor, writer, producer, aerialist, clown, teacher, and so much more. Sara, how are you doing today?
Thanks for the introduction. I'm doing fine. Thanks, Clifton.
Yeah, good.
How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good.
About the same
Hanging in?
Yeah.
Well, the sun coming out definitely helps, Have you have you been doing anything during quarantine, like outside, outdoors? Have you been camping or anything like that?
Yeah, I've been sneaking out every now and then. That joie de vivre, I find it hard to stay inside when the sun comes out. And I went briefly to the local city parks, and they've been really packed.
Yeah.
So I started doing little drives that are not too far, just tentatively heading out to the gorge. And that's been good. We have Tryon State Park too, which is that counts as staying local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to stay close to home as instructed, but still get outside. That's I'm doing that dance.
Nice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I need that forest, That's why I'm here in the Pacific Northwest.
It's so true. Mm-hmm. The forest is
It's super hard not to be there.
So the last thing I saw of yours and that I had been seeing around was Tether. I think I saw a version of it in late 2018 or early 2019 maybe at Headwaters. And then I saw you were doing it again at Echo this year at the Fertile Ground. Could you describe what that show is and where you are in the process of that?
Yes, I would be happy to. It's actually two different shows. They're both rope suspension acts, which I guess is fairly unique, even though it's taking up a lot of my life right now. But the project I did with Fertile Ground is a duet, and I started a new project with a collaborator. But it's definitely, as you're recognizing, it's on the same track in terms of investigating, storytelling or just conveying meaning, at the very basic level, using this medium, which is challenging, and athletic and difficult in all sorts of ways. But yeah, it's a new show. It's called The Book of Jay, and it's sort of up in the air at the moment because my collaborator lives in Brooklyn, and even if he didn't, what the heck is happening with physical theater, especially physical theater that involves more than one person.
Right.
So yeah, it's a really exciting show. I can kind of go off academically on it, but Tether is the show that is more in the can. And what I'm doing with that is I'm getting ready to film it and try to stream it and disseminate it that way because it's done. Because it's a one-woman show that I'm sure will evolve, but it tells a story and it has a script and it has cues that I've really figured out, and it feels ready to share. And so I was hoping to tour. Actually, I was hoping that this year would be about booking those shows, and I hadn't gotten there yet. I hadn't had booked shows that got canceled, but the show was ready to have a life. So now it's just getting kind of rechanneled.
Yeah.
With the help of Fuse, actually. That's a big thing that I'm doing is staying active with Fuse, which is a tremendous gift.
Yeah, you're a company member there, right?
Yeah, so it's a fairly small group that's grown in the last couple of years because we've established a board and gotten a little bit more legitimate in our interworkings. But before that, it was 4 or 5 people for 8 years. And now it's doubling and tripling in size, which is very exciting. And it means that we have some resources that we didn't have before. So we have a space, and it wasn't meant to be a storage unit. It's meant to be a rehearsal space that we're working in. So now we're going in there one at a time with like a day in between, basically, is the plan now, and trying to be responsible about our shared space. And we're calling it the Fuse Box. It's up on North Loring, where Simon Max does his casting. And it's a great little spot. It's kind of a white box, and it's really, really high. Got a huge lift. So I put in a hard point, and I can, work on technique there and do some aerial stuff like circus and my own rope stuff there. And I can train and then use it as a rehearsal space and then a studio and film my work. So I'm trying to film Tether eventually. And then meanwhile, I'm just doing my own work to try to stay on top of what is for me a fairly recent craft that I'm not an expert at yet. So just to try to take on the next project, like the Book of J, means that I really need to figure some stuff out and like get better at what I'm doing. So that's where I'm at now, is in this very kind of personal, like hermity space, because that's the world we live in at the moment. I've been given this context. So I kind of ran with that and was like, I'll just get better at my rope technique and self-suspension and like self-expression using this thing.
So how do you explore narrative using that technique?
It's come from the piece. It's come from the narrative. It's come from a need to tell a particular story, and a very particular personal story or a political climate and a situation, a very personal situation with a friend of mine who is the collaborator. So knowing the deepest things about myself turned into a solo performance, and knowing some of his autobiography, basically, that he tells me as our friendship, like across the continental U.S., he tells me these stories, and I kind of responded with like, we need to express this. This is a political thing that's happened. So the Book of J is a biblical story, we're using it to resonate with the present, kind of reaching as far back as we can to like the power of narrative. And there's a lot of Bibles out there. I don't know if you're aware. There's about as many Bibles as there are Christians.
True.
So as someone who tells stories, like that to me is mind-blowing. That is a hit. Like that thing did so well.
Right. It's a bestseller.
Like 3.9 million. How many? No, it can't be billion. There aren't that. No, is it billion? Is it 3.9 billion?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I think I need to Google this as we speak. It's not okay that I don't know this, but there are about the same number of Christians as there are Bibles, and it's such a good book.
Right.
Yeah. So to respond to something very personal, I just dig into the most elemental thing I can think of, basically.
Nice.
Yeah. That's cool.
I'm looking for the answer right now.
It's
2.3 billion out of 7.5 billion. So that's the internet approximation right now. It is in the billions.
Yeah. That's amazing.
That's a lot of Bible.
That's incredible. So, do you mind if I ask you some questions about learning rope suspension?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
About learning rope suspension.
No, I don't. I appreciate that it is a sensitive subject, and I'm still figuring out how to talk about it. So we can go forward into this semi-uncharted territory together.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and because I've been working with rope for a while and learning about shibari and things like that, and I've been just curious about how one does get into learning suspension. Is it just going through the community and finding the people and talking? Because now it's like I was hoping to try to find some classes or a teacher this summer to like learn the basics about it, but it seems like that's gonna be that's kind of off the table now, or a lot harder to imagine. But
right.
Just in the normal world, I don't know. I'm just curious about your journey in that, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, it sounds like such a simple question, but I just in the time it took to listen to you ask it, I just went in 17 different directions. So forgive me.
No worries.
How does one, if you figure that out, let me know, is my first answer. I don't know how one goes about learning this stuff. It's really hard. It's kind of niche, and I would say it's important to recognize there isn't a right way, that you're talking about a form that exists between a rope, which is a linear, possibly single-dimensional, right, or two-dimensional object, if you think about it as math, as opposed to a physical thing, right? And then combining that with the human form, the combinations are infinite, right? And so you could figure it out on your own. You could sit at home in your room for 8 hours a day and feed yourself and take your time and be careful and learn a better technique than anyone knows already.
Sure.
Right? So I think that's where I go first. It's like, I'm not going to tell you how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not that good at it, frankly. Like I'm a good person to talk to about it, but I'm not the teacher necessarily or the one or the role model. But my journey was pretty particular. It was fairly personal. It started in relationships. So it's kind of that person to person lineage. It's in that realm that like yoga lived in for a while before it became more popularly disseminated. And I find that interesting to be part of what feels like a kind of a younger craft, that it doesn't have a scene, to speak of, like a codified scene. It doesn't have certifications. Even rigging. I don't know if you're aware, circus rigging does not have its own certifications. That scares me, but
I was looking into all that and all the different rigging certifications there are, but it's very much like industrial entertainment rigging certification is kind of what's out there, or like theater, like union stuff. It was just interesting to learn about.
Union riggers for theater have the skills, basically, that you need to safely set up the architecture, and a lot of the tools. So if you know anything about safely rigging equipment, you do have the principles. If you know anything about combining loads and hauling, if you've ever tied a bowline or knot, or like a square knot, if you have some principles, that's also a foundation. So there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of union riggers who also get into like recreational rigging and circus rigging, and there's a lot of Venn diagrams there. And then in general, join a scene, make friends, talk to people is what the community would say. And that's the good advice from the community. It's like, don't experiment alone, right? So the idea of like the solo hermit genius is not a good idea. Unless you're really, really, really conservative and not taking risks. And that's a mantra for like parkour is we don't take risks, which is like a funny thing for the spectator to hear because it certainly looks risky, but the idea is to work in a progression and to not, in terms of tying, you don't tie outside of your skill set. You only do what you for sure know that you can do when you are going to suspend yourself or, bring another person in. You just don't take risks with another person. You take risks in your learning, and you take risks on the ground, and you take risks on your own body maybe, but there's an integrity to like the medium is a body. So a big part of the learning process is getting to know your body, getting to know what other people are like, working on your relationships, right? Like you're asking a super simple question and I'm throwing the world at you, but like that's the work is how do you get better at this? Well, you become a better person. You do push-ups, and then you also maybe get a pattern from someone, right? And that's a huge step because why reinvent the wheel? There are people who have really good patterns and who can teach you about like load bearing on the body and nerves. So you learn about nerve pathways. I'm sort of educated on that. Basically, I know from a teacher where I can safely put rope for load bearing that doesn't risk nerves. And I don't have all the medical knowledge about where the nerves go. I just know from a rope instructor, here's some conservative places.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I don't have to be the medical expert. So a good teacher will allow you to not be the expert on everything and just give you some answers.
Yeah.
Find a good teacher is a good start. I can plug some people. I can save that for the end. I'm making my little list. I know some local teachers and some people who exist online too.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say what about it made you want to put it into performance, and like what about like tying and suspension is related to the performance that is made by it,
Yeah. I, as a theater artist, I bring it into anything that's fun for me, kind of probably pathologically. Like I'll make it all into a show. All right. And so that was a natural progression. That's something I do. I get into hobbies and then I'm like, I love baking. I'm going to put on the baking show now. So that's something I do as a human. But I got extra inspired because I was serving as someone else's artwork for a while. Like I was getting tied up by a different rigger who's a photographer. And so right from the beginning, that was the appeal. I was already being a performer. I was already, participating in an aesthetic realm. And then it became a very personal exploration. It became connected to my athletic arc as a circus performer. It started to infiltrate other parts of my life. But the initial draw was aesthetic. It was this beautiful thing that also looked like something I wanted to embody as an aerialist. that kind of drew me in, and then it became relational. Then in order to do that, it's very clear to me that I didn't want to have that aesthetic experience once I realized, how rigorous it is, how difficult it is, and what it asks of they call it, they say rope bottom, the person who's like receiving whatever the rope is doing. It's so demanding that I wasn't interested in doing it as like a pickup hobby. I wasn't interested in doing it as an artist with whom I didn't have a personal connection. And I became more interested in this one person's art and forging a relationship with that one person.
Yeah.
So it's kind of simultaneous, like aesthetic and, personal, emotional, and expressive in that way. I think that's where the appeal is, because I'm really drawn to that kind of integrated work. And that's why I kept going in that direction. I can bring any hobby into the theater, but this is so deeply felt for me and so expressive to me personally that I keep coming back to it.
Sure.
So I was, I was modeling for this person, but then he also does performances, and he also is like an inquisitive person. So just is experimentational, like in his general, in his interests. So that I was like, from the very beginning, given this entry, like I'm extremely grateful. His name's Noble, by the way. I'm saying his name now. He's been a rope guy for a long time, and I've been dabbling in this for like maybe 5 years. And that's on the receiving end. On the tying end, fewer, maybe 3.
Yeah.
So he's been doing it for like 30.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So he's just on a level. So my interest and my ability to just take on any of this independently really came from direct download.
Yeah.
Just really,
Cool.
I mean, it's so lucky. Like I feel so blessed. That doesn't exist. It's very hard to get that kind of mentorship and that kind of relationship. I feel really lucky that we found each other, and that our artistic interests aligned enough that it was more than, just for fun. Like it really made sense for us to work together. And he was able to teach me things and give me the ability to then like, none of the things that I do, even though I can tie the knots, I would never have gotten there if he hadn't helped me get there and give me those like levels up on the way. It would take decades, to recreate it on my own.
Right.
Yeah.
So in some ways you kind of got lucky by finding a mentor, because you're saying, for the people who want to get involved in this type of art form, it seems like it's hard. It seems like there's a lot of like work that you have to do on your own, and then kind of eventually as you start to learn the basics or that kind of thing, it's really a matter of luck whether or not you can keep going. But you found someone who really kind of propelled you into the art form much deeper and much quicker than what seems normal. It seems very rare.
Yeah, I would say, like, it's hard to say what normal is because nobody does it alone, really. Because you shouldn't. I should say also, it's probably late in the game to be saying this, but I don't practice suspension alone. There's always somebody else in the room. So I'm also really lucky now that I have a little team of people who I can coordinate with, and it's mostly Chris. I have a domestic partner. We share space. And so I ask him for the favor of sitting in the studio with me. And like, sometimes he's kind enough to be involved and like be my AV guy, so I can make something, which is that's a huge boon to the process to have somebody else there. So like even practice without this teacher involves community and like support, and I'm not doing it alone. Yeah. And I can practice things without risk, without as much risk, but there's no zero. So like practicing the knots and practicing the harnesses without lifting myself up and doing the rigorous stunt. It's a sort of half practice, and you have to do it, but you don't really get the work done until someone else is in the room and you take some risks.
So how did you get into performance at first? Like what was your first avenue into performing on stage?
Oh, that's a good question. I think in terms of first experiences on stage, they're really young. Like I had a natural affinity and I wanted to be performing. And then my interest expanded from there. Like I didn't necessarily know I wanted to be a director, but then, and when I say early, I mean, I think I was in the school play at 4 and like loving it.
Yeah.
I wanted nothing but to play Vashti and like have a scepter and banish someone from the kingdom. Like I was throwing my weight around, and like as a toddler, so that's still like, I still have a sense of play and just natural fun and affinity. for the theater that's always been there. I don't think I've ever taken a substantial break, you know, and not in terms of work, but in terms of thinking about theater and reading it and processing it and feeling like a participant. Yeah, I feel like that's been innate. My grandmother was an opera singer, and I think raised me in that awareness, like just fed it into my head as a baby that, you know, she's a performer and that she sings and these are the sounds and this is the music and these are the costumes. So I always knew that that existed.
Are you from Oregon or are you from?
No, I'm from Florida.
Florida.
Grew up, yeah, I'm from South Miami-Dade, 305. What is it? There it is.
Nice.
305. Yeah. They had landed the hanging chads and pretty much everything terrible. Sorry about that. And I grew up with that grandmother who lived on Miami Beach and like was, you know, South American and sang and brought us fruit festivals and, you know, had a very like Miami upbringing on some levels. Yeah, and my father grew up on Miami Beach too, which is pretty rare. Like I think that's when it was born, was when he grew up with Miami Beach. So we're one of like the early settlers.
So when you moved to Portland, have you noticed that, you know, being in Portland has influenced your theater making at all, or have you? Yeah,
I left college on the East Coast and as an undergrad and came out here. So I've been here for over a decade, and it's been the career, you know, I've had as a theater artist. I did a few things in school, but I was a full-time student and like 22. So I don't consider much of what I did on the East Coast any part of my career, rather than like it's education and it's like foundational. But this is where I became part of a theater ensemble and really realized that that's what drew me into the theater, that like working with other people and working on physical theater really became important to me. I had a vague awareness of that. I was exposed to it in college. It was actually, I need to remember the name of this group, but it was a South African group that came through New York and performed and changed my entire cellular makeup in their performance. And it was viewpoints based. And so because I was in the theater program, I got this like feedback, you know, that we got to see the performance and then have a workshop, you know, in our acting class and get a lot of their process. And they talked about viewpoints and took us through some things. And that was a pin for a while. And then in Oregon, I just got wind of it and I saw an audition and I started going to studio and realized like there's a continuity to what I'm responding to. So viewpoints vocabulary is what drew me to Fuse and what drew us to each other. And I still like, I get a little teary talking about viewpoints. It's like the closest I come to a religion right now. The science part gets me. So that's been pretty continuous. Fuse has been up and down in a few different identities in terms of productivity. But early on, it was a few of the same people, and we were doing weekly studio sessions, so like 3 hours every Saturday. And then that changed hands and we continued doing it with different artistic directorship. So that was a really important foundation. We took a break for a while and people went in different directions and went on tour. And now we're in another phase of meeting weekly on the internet. So we're doing this. But yeah, that weekly engagement with like the vocabulary was really inspiring to me. And I've brought that out of Fuse into other work that I've done.
Yeah.
Something I still use.
So actually we heard about Fuse did a online show recently, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell me about that? Because I think I only heard about it after the fact, unfortunately. But
we co-produced a fundraiser.
Okay, cool.
Which is super awesome. I want to give a lot of credit to Kate Fay. Kate Fay Cummings was the impetus and the motor and all the fuel. Like she just made it happen, and she petitioned it to Fuse as a co-production, so that we would collaborate with her and help make it happen. And it was primarily she and Chris Beatty doing the tech, making the Zoom host then feed into a video stream that was pre-recorded, and and making all the mics work. Like he did a lot of tech to make that happen. So it was a fairly successful fundraiser. I'm really proud of everybody. I did no work on the actual fundraiser part. I submitted a piece.
Okay.
So we took 15-minute pieces from the community. And so that's where my work went, because I out of some work and needed some work.
What did you submit?
We like basically allowed that. I submitted a rope piece. That's what I'm up to now. And that was that's the third thing that I've done now for stage,
Nice.
like with rope.
Nice.
Now you know my entire repertoire. That's where we're at. thing 3. So it's great, like being a theater artist my whole life, to be such a beginner. This is why it's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
So I just used it to kind of express where I was at and what I was feeling. I love working in constraints of materials, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I gave myself like a hard point and some ropes and a set. And then I figured out what the music would be. And then I was like, I have sort of an idea of what the feelings are, the arc is. And I wonder what will happen if I try it, because it's hard enough that you don't have infinite time or options. Like you're forced to come to a conclusion. So I just did that. I just challenged myself to kind of go more abstract and without such a clear narrative. And that was great. That was a really good experience for me. I loved the other people's submissions though. Like I went super, high art dance theater, but like, oh man, because that's what I needed to do. I needed to get that out of my system. But there was a puppet Harry Potter for 15 minutes of my life that I wish was an hour. There were some singer-songwriters who were great. There was Gabby and Atlas stand out. Ernie LaJoy is a Fuse board member and a songwriter. So he had some great, hilarious COVID tunes. We got, what else did we get? Oh, Chris's band, Death Knell, did a spot that was actually including like full video. He did a quality video edit, so there's kind of a music video that went with it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was so proud. Yeah, and it was May 1st, so I think we all rose like to this stress and then used the initial anxiety, to make something. And I've not seen that energy since. Like, I don't know where it is.
What do you think about this
responded.
This kind of brave new world where we're putting all these kind of performance pieces online on Zoom? How do you feel about that transition?
I mean, I sort of love it because I love science and I love following new turns of events, like what's going to happen, so I'm horrified at what's going on in the world, but I'm really grateful at this thing I can fixate on, which is the internet, which is the most fascinating thing, right? And Fuse went off. Okay, I went off on Fuse on physical theater, and like, what does this mean now?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're not in the same room. Is theater a thing in a time and a place? And I'm super turned on by this discussion. Like, you can't tell me we're not in the same place right now.
Right.
Here you are in my room. If an alien walked in the door, they would see our 3 faces on this screen, and we're all talking.
Well, and there's the idea of, when things are happening live, you do feel connected. It's like, watching TV. When something falls on live TV, we're all witnessing, something happen together. So a lot of the argument is that you lose the liveness once you record and all this kind of stuff. But I don't know. It's weird.
Right. The discussion about liveness, because if theater isn't a place, then it needs to be a time. I don't know. I think that's kind of limiting. I think it is a place still, first of all, because physical theater is not over. Like, that's happening. We're just doing metaphysical theater now.
Right.
And we can do that. And what is live? When they do live, it's 30-second delay because they need to censor.
Right.
Right. And that's not live. Right. So we can now engage with this as a discussion where we have not engaged. That has only been a part of tech in the past. Now it's a part of my creative expression. Now it's a part of art to possibly deal with this little chasm in the audience's mind of how live is this? Right. And is this live? Or when is this theater piece going to happen? Right? Like, we can ask different questions now.
Yeah, I think there's things we can do within a digital medium, too, that hint toward a weird liveness. And one of the new things that makes something seem live is, like, glitching now make it seem live. And, like, can you lean into that? Things like that. And it's
lying definitely makes things feel live.
Oh, why do you say
Telling
that?
people it's live when it isn't.
Yeah.
Didn't they do that? Did you hear Sondheim's 90th concert? I saw parts of it. I didn't attend it live, but it was an event for Sondheim's 90th birthday. It was going to be a live concert that people attended in person, and it became an online concert, yada, yada, right?
Sure.
And they did these beautiful Zoom duets. And we had just tried to do this. We called the performance the Cause Cabaret.
Yeah.
Right, series that Kate Faye does. So we just did the Cause Cabaret, and we did these pre-recorded videos, which take up so much space. It's a huge effort to store it and stream it, right? The issues with recorded video. And here's Jake Gyllenhaal doing a beautiful duet with someone, quote, live. We're
Right.
going, without a delay, with perfect balancing. And I'm like pulling out my hair, going, how did you do it? I watched the Colbert Report, and he admits they recorded it to a scratch track 5 seconds before.
Of course.
It was mixed, quote, live, which is 25 seconds before it is streamed.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So it's live in
Well,
that.
I guess that's even more live than I thought it would be, honestly. But yeah.
It was live in that, like, there was a time pressure. Like,
Yeah.
he had to show
Right,
up and
yeah.
do it. And then
Right,
she had
yeah.
to show up and do it. And then they sent it to the editors.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with
pressure?
the All in the Family live kind of like reboot that they did maybe like 3 or 4 years ago with Jamie Foxx was in it.
Yeah.
And so they did a
I
basically
did not see it.
yeah, there's an All in the Family reboot that was done live on Fox or one of those channels. And what happens is at some point, Jamie Foxx's character, which is Fred something from the other show. There's a spinoff show. I can't remember the name of that right now. But anyway, Jamie Foxx just broke character. He just started laughing. And this was happening on live TV. And it's not like Saturday Night Live where you expect this kind of thing to happen. And so that was like one of those moments where it was like, okay, so even if they did kind of stagger it a little bit, they let that moment live for all of us. And it was like, and it wasn't just like a Jimmy Fallon break character. It was like he could not stop laughing. He had to stop his lines. He broke the fourth wall. Like we were all in on the joke. And then he reset.
And it was not even in the genre.
Yeah, exactly. And then he reset and he just continued with his lines and got back on track. But it was totally something that you would expect from theater. But it was happening on TV.
That is a powerful moment.
Yeah. But, TV is so resistant to that kind of stuff where, it's not perfect or smoothed out and all that kind of stuff. So maybe now with this glitchy Zoom call media that we have now, we'll get more used to mistakes in our media.
I love this new narrative of what live theater is. I haven't thought about it this way. It seems like it's more in the hands of post-production.
Yeah.
You don't want to force a glitch, but by choosing not to clean and by being honest about the take that you have, and then you can still up the production value, because that's, of course, what we want. The artists don't want our work to now be shitty. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
We still want high production value. We still want to be able to make the video look and sound good. So that's what we faced right away. As Fuse, me personally, I want to share this, and I want to share it with the same ease that I used to share live theater.
Yeah.
And here I am now. I'm a lighting designer and a technician, and I'm a DP, and wow, my resume just tripled in
Yeah.
In some ways, it gives us more
good at any of these
agency over
things,
our
yeah.
work as well. We have more control to make the kind of work. I mean, all these theater artists are being kind of forced
Absolutely.
into their own creative bubbles. And so now that we're going straight to streaming, we'll see a lot more, unique projects evolve, I think, out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that. I feel that really hard right now. I think it's a privilege that I get to step back from capitalism. It's not that we're all forced to. Some people are trapped in it even
Sure.
without money, right? So the fact that I'm surviving and I get to feel like a hermit is, I don't know. I feel like a real pressure both to give everything I have away and to make the most of this time and to give something to show for it. These pressures are not necessarily healthy,
Yeah.
but my response to, having this amount of freedom, I feel it. It's a real fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's why I'm choosing the media that I'm choosing, is because it's me and this camera and not a whole lot of people around. A lot of the company discussion is how can we make these projects we were going to make still happen?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I get that attachment. I get it, especially if you wrote it, right? Or you were just really set on directing it. You still want it to happen, but I left right away. I was somewhere else entirely. I'm like, what is this internet art? What am I doing on my own? What's next for me?
Yeah.
And partially that has to do with my socioeconomic status, which is right in the sweet spot of just being an artist and really being pretty poor, but also being in a class and having a safety net that poverty for me is something else. It's a number, but it's a relative lifestyle. And I do still have students still.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of work, but because I have internet access and the security of this apartment, I get to teach even now.
Yeah.
What's that process been
and
like?
It's not paying my bills, but that has been a strange and sort of lonely process. I'll admit, not because of the media. Actually, I really like playing on the internet, and I like this new frontier. But I even like the problem solving. As I said, I'm like onto what the new solution is. I like this idea of what is yoga now. What do people need now? What is my curriculum? Like, I started writing a curriculum right away. But I don't love that the system is so disrupted that sometimes I show up and there's nobody there.
Yeah.
I don't have students all the time. So in that sense, it's lonely that I can't just be a hermit and make decisions and make the world the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
Because I don't have control over all of it, right? And other people out there, they see the sunshine and they don't want to do my aerial class that doesn't have an aerial apparatus.
Right.
They might show up for some of the fitness classes on the ground, but if it's sunny out, they are less likely to. Whereas at the gym, I teach at the Echo on a regular basis, and now I teach on the internet through the Echo Theater on Hawthorne. And there's a reason to show up at the gym. There's camaraderie, and there's more than the equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only thing you have to offer is your leadership as a teacher. And it feels like a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
You don't have any stuff. You don't have any other students that at least they're showing up to hang out with each other. No, it's just you. So yeah, I mean, it's ringleading, it's directing more than it is teaching in a lot of ways.
You become a motivational speaker, some sort of like life coach.
Yeah, it's more coaching than it is teaching now. So it's been weird. Like, the numbers are down, and that's kind of sad because everybody's figuring out, people don't have the resources. And really, it's a political moment. Like, I'm being paid by the government's PPP and SB loans through my organization. So not only are people not really showing up, it doesn't matter that much because we're in this weird window of 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Of like a financial little, I don't know how much you know about that, but the small business loans are trying to keep their organization staffed. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. So they're paying some payroll. So they're paying my payroll for a little while. And so we can offer this on a sliding scale from like $0 to $10.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're sort of stuck and also way outside of capitalism right now.
Mm-hmm. And then in the fall, it'll be really interesting to see what happens to all these performances. We'll see, what shows people run to, and we'll also see what people feel comfortable doing in person. And that's going to be the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I hope that people don't suddenly abandon all the work that we've dug into for these months. The quality can go up. We can collaborate more maybe, but I've started doing something that I like doing.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing I didn't think I would discover, but I really like doing my own work, turns out. So I hope that people still want to watch online performances when we're allowed to be in each other's faces, because we do still have to, it's stepwise, right? When we expose ourselves to crowds, it's certain people who are able to, and it's certain numbers, and it's certain occasions. It's not going to be black and white. I don't feel like everyone's going to rush back into life as it used to be. It's really going to be stepwise and subjective. Mm-hmm. So I think there will be some people who are going to be at home more, who aren't ready to go out, or who just are more vulnerable. And hopefully there'll still be this new, person-to-person internet dissemination of material.
Have you been exploring different...
I don't want to throw it all away.
Oh, have you been exploring different platforms in this kind of journey, where we're streaming things? Like, have you looked in, like, TikTok, for instance, with the type of work that you do?
I still haven't TikToked. Do you TikTok? Are you TikToking?
I mean, so I created a TikTok at the beginning of quarantine, and I quickly realized why people do it, because it's really fun, but it's really addicting.
It's really fun. The dancing is fun.
Not only the dancing, but the storytelling is fun. And there's a lot of, of really interesting narrative creators on TikTok. And there's kind of a spectrum of dancers and young kids who just kind of like do remakes of popular videos. But then there's also some people who do some pretty original content that's really cool.
Right.
And it also seems like it's become an outlet for professional dancers. So people who practice movement professionally realize that they couldn't really do the in-studio stuff, and so they're trying to figure out how to evolve to TikTok and like a platform where people are actually paying attention, and that has caused a I mean, it's been the cause of a lot of really cool content as well. So you see a lot of people who are really good movers using TikTok as a platform to do what they do. So I wonder, with the type of stuff that you do, I mean, yeah, it'd be cool to see all types of aerial art on TikTok if it was filmed in a certain way, and I could just see that.
I mean, like anything, especially anything online, it's exactly what you make it, right? And so, of course, it's going to be flooded by teenagers doing cheer dance for a while, and that turns you off. And then, but you're right. I've been exposed to enough of TikTok, like on YouTube and through my friends, that there's a lot of intrigue. And it's also just where a conversation is happening. It's where the celebrities are going to make their first statements, and then it'll go through Twitter, and then it'll go through Instagram, and then the news will pick it up, right? But it's just like, I'm not ignoring it. I just haven't been participating, really. I'm just spectating a little.
Yeah.
And it's something that, like, it still hasn't been blown up entirely. Like, the creative limits haven't been explored nearly, I don't think. It's exciting that it makes video editing easier. Like, really, the media and the easy app for tech is really cool.
Yeah, it's cool because, like, the kids who are on it, like, are learning so much about video editing, and you're able to do it just on your phone. And, like, I teach it at elementary school, and the 5th graders have been sending in, like, video content that they've been making, and some of it's like wow, like they know how to edit video. I mean, maybe there's someone at home helping them, but, like, a lot of the time I think it's just them, and it's just, like, creating this, like, innate knowledge and, like, understanding how to reverse video, and, like, it's created some pretty cool stuff. It seems a lot of the time
good for their brains, like, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very. I feel like it's formulaic though, and so if to put on, I don't know. It's because it's very much like trend based, and some of the cool stuff I've seen is, like, people putting their own idea on stuff, but it's hard for me to imagine as an artist, like, my art on there. But I guess it's also because I haven't seen, like, the narrative stuff you're talking about, Phil. I had TikTok for a little while, watching it on my phone, and I just couldn't figure out how to, like, see the stuff that was the most interesting to me. It was just like a feed, and it was all, I don't know, it was just like I wasn't running across all the good stuff that I see in, like, the compilations on YouTube. So it's like, might as well just go to the compilations on YouTube.
What I learned is that it takes it's almost like Twitter or Instagram, where it almost takes a while for you to get your follow count to a place where your feed is something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, when you create a new Instagram, you're sitting there just following random people and friends and things, and then maybe a year later you're like, okay, now I followed all of the pages that are posting things that I actually care about.
Feeding back.
Yeah. So I think it's like that.
You have to make it serve you.
Yeah. And there's a really interesting kind of cultural clash that happened recently on TikTok, where a lot of Indian people started picking it up. And so now, because it's all the same TikTok, because it's a Chinese company, you'll be scrolling through your TikTok, and you'll see, people from all over the world TikToking in very different ways than Americans are TikToking. And that's kind of a new development on the app. So it'll be interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
The globalizing effect is really profound, I think. That's what I noticed right away, was that TikTok was people in China dancing with people in the States. Like, that was the first thing I saw, was, like, these viral videos were, and I found that really moving. Like, that's why I got interested, was that it's not always people doing the same dance, I guess. I don't know what all the memes are. I'm not as familiar as I could be, but that component was really fun for me, the global dance thing. And, like, especially to be what we have now, in a time of isolation, like this thing of dancing together, that's, like, real embodiment. It's not sitting on the couch. So even though it's kind of like the cheer dance that all exists in the cell phone frame, I'm dancing for you on Zoom now, it's super lame. It's dance.
Yeah.
There's something to that. The part that I guess I shy away from, which seems to be telescoping in social media, is the viral goal. Like, the part that says you participate not to be entertained as a spectator, but the part of you that's participating in order to be famous and in order to go viral. And, like, the ego part, I find really touchy, and then it's kind of sticky for me to engage on that level, because so much of being a performer has to do with managing your ego. That, like, I don't want to do it in my free time too.
I was gonna say that's like that fine line.
Sorry, Phil. You go, Phil. Phil, you talk. You talk.
I was gonna say that's that fine line
Phil.
between being a performer and being an entertainer, and it's just that thing that we keep seeing happen in our culture. I mean, it's so tied to capitalism, right? Where these are people who need to be famous, right? They need to trend because that represents economic health or some sort of economic recovery, and so there's that aspect of it. I don't know. Everybody, like you're saying, it's such an ego thing. It's become such a thing where we all are just trying to participate in the same zeitgeist moments together and see who hits and who doesn't. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say it's also, I mean, you and I, Phil, I think you brought this up to me a while ago because you had been teaching at the high school for a while, and they had brought up the idea that these kids have no idea of, like, privacy. And I think it also goes in hand in hand with this, like, idea of commodifying any interest you have, or, like, turn your hobby into your job, or, like, you know, turn your personality into your lifestyle, into your living, you know. And it's, like, you know, very image based, obviously. And so, like, the younger generation has no problem commodifying whatever it is they do, or, you know, a lot of there's less of a problem there, whereas, like, you know, there used to be an idea of, like, selling out and that being, like, not a good thing, but it's like now it's like everybody's goal is to get a sponsor, or, you know, is like, and we don't besmirch artists as much as we used to for starting to make money from, like, corporate interest, or just, you know, signing, because, you know, what else are you gonna do to make money? You know, it's like it's interesting. Yeah, that's all I had to say about that. And I mean, TikTok's part of that, and just this idea that, like, everything cool I do is online, you know, and got to make sure that I don't miss a moment of what I do.
I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about how our economy has moved from this place where, you know, there's a certain level of support on the local level and local economies through small business and stuff like that, to people kind of scrambling to find the best place in the U.S. to get close enough to kind of the geyser of economic growth that they can kind of shoot up with it, right? So, like, you can imagine, like, you either want to move to Silicon Valley, or you want to move to one of these places in America where it's just the economy is just spewing money, and you want to be a part of that. So you want to either be in L.A. and get involved with Netflix if you're some sort of actor performer on TV, or you want to, if you do internet things, you want to be in Silicon Valley or Wall Street, you want to be in New York, that kind of thing. So people aren't just practicing normal, they're not just doing their normal artistic practice in small economies. They're moving to these places where they can jump and be on board a geyser of economic growth. And that's kind of what TikTok represents as well, where or any of these apps where people are, like you're saying, are just trending for the sake of trending, because they're trying to, you know, be the next Nicki Minaj or next. They're trying to shoot for the stars.
We need that, though.
Right.
Weirdly, we need that corporate system somehow to exist so that we can surf on it. Like, in the midst of all this, you can opt out entirely and hope that, like, someone gets your smoke signal, or you, like, try your way, you know, between the Nicki Minaj posts, and you're like, here's my art, it's got integrity, I promise, you know. And they're like, I don't know how they're going to distinguish from all this.
Right.
Just hope someone sees it.
Right.
Like, I mean, to answer your question, I'm on Instagram trying to do this, and it's a weird experience trying to be a professional artist and use it as a promotional tool.
Yeah.
A professional promotional tool. It feels safer to me to engage that way than as a human who's, like you say, I didn't need to put everything cool I do online. Like, I know people do it and then they refer to it in a professional sphere. Here's my personal Instagram account. I just don't feel that comfortable being so casual with that, with my professional tools. You know, I like to put a thesis there.
Yeah.
And then Instagram feels a little safer for me.
Instagram?
You know, I can be really transparent somehow. You know, then I can engage. When I'm thesis forward, then I feel like people come at me the way I want them to.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be there as a civilian. That's kind of not ready for that.
Yeah. You don't want. Yeah. Nobody needs to see the real you. That's for.
I mean, I'm not averse to being seen. I just feel like Instagram is a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's a full-time job.
I don't want to be doing that kind of work just to be a person. I'll do that for my job.
Yeah.
It's so true.
But yeah, I put weird stuff on the internet that I think, you know, engages a conversation that I want to be in.
Yeah.
As opposed to whatever else. Like, maybe making me money is a side product of that and an ultimate goal, but it's definitely not just to be seen for its own sake. Right. There's like a lot of what's going on.
Right. And there's so much as like you're trying to put your project that you've been probably contemplating and working on for 10 years next to somebody who drew something or created something in an afternoon, and it's all the same.
Yeah. I mean, that's cool. Like, that's why the platform's there, right? Like, let the people decide. I have to figure out where my own space is. I don't know. Do I need a website? Does everybody really need that? Yeah.
Well, and this is what we're figuring out right now as performers is what do we need to succeed online? We never had to think about this before.
Yeah. No, it's not entirely clear to me, really. I hope you have some answers.
Yeah. Great. Well, this seems like a good place to take a break. And then we can come back and do headlines. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second to talk about our show sponsors. Coho is a theater that's located in Northwest Portland, and their mission is to broaden perspectives and cultivate empathy through vibrant and intimate productions. If you're looking to get involved with Coho or interested in seeing a show, you can check them out at 2257 Northwest Raleigh Street in Portland, Oregon, or you can look at their website, which is cohoproductions.org. And now back to the show. All right, and we're back. It's time for headlines.
Headlines.
Headlines is the part of the show where we read some of our favorite headlines from the week, and we get your take on what we're reading on the topic. I guess I don't know. So we're gonna read some headlines to you, and you just kind of tell us what you think about them, and we'll just move through them. I've got one here about the game Animal Crossing. And I don't know how much you guys know about the game Animal Crossing, but it's a game that's on the Nintendo Switch, and it is kind of like a Second Life kind of game where you build your own world, that kind of thing. Well, the headline is, Animal Crossing isn't just a game. It's a political platform. And I don't know if anybody's seen this, but over the last couple of weeks, AOC has been visiting people's islands and campaigning on people's islands. PETA staged a protest of the museum on the Animal Crossing.
This is what I'm talking about.
And
PETA, wait a second. PETA staged a protest of a museum that exists within the game?
Yes. It's a museum where you go around and you collect fossils and you can store bugs at the museum. And animals.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
And so right now I'm looking at a picture of an Earth Day rally in the game where the characters are wearing face masks and they're holding signs that say Earth Day, save the planet, and one person is saying, eat the rich.
Eat the rich, nice.
Yo, this is just what needs to happen. This is just what's happening. This is great.
I love it.
I mean, it's a place. It's a legitimate place in space.
It's become
We're
a
live, right? It's live.
Now
I mean, I don't know. Like, there's television, right, which is polished and corporate,
right,
and it has commercials. There's live theater, which I guess is just live dissemination on the internet, right? Sharing a space and a time online, and like a protest. Yeah, that's a protest. That's just a protest.
You got to, and with AOC, it's like you got to meet people where they are. It's like, especially now, it's like people can't go anywhere anyways, but even if they could, there's probably a lot of people who would play Animal Crossing instead of going to an AOC rally.
Do you know how honored I would be if AOC came to my island and spoke to my islanders?
Yeah, I've heard about like celebrities like showing up at people's, islands and just hanging out, and then like, holy shit, I was like Elijah Wood or somebody. But this is campaigning is something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny.
So this is just where things are going.
Okay, this is you just created a really great mood, and I'm really sorry that I might totally destroy it. But you brought up headlines, and like, it's a tentative place to be. I want to protest right now. I'm sorry. I have to, like, we have to talk about the elephant in the room for a sec. There's been some violence in the news, and I'm really sad. And, you know, when you say, how are you, I want to say that I'm fine, but I also want to say everything is terrifying and just talk about the one thing on my mind. I try not to do that because it's antisocial, but it's hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to say that I want to say George Floyd, say his name, and that I'm really sad, and there's been some violence, and I really want to protest, and you've legitimately given me a place to think about, because it's really not safe. Like, I was thinking about driving to Seattle and marching, and I just haven't been taking those kinds of risks yet. Like, being part of a rally just doesn't seem like what's in my risk profile and, like, my family right now. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like, what do we do? I don't want to go to but, like, we can go and stage a protest online.
Yeah, and I think that
numbers mean something.
And there's a lot of ways to use the internet to bring awareness and things like that right now. And there's a lot of ways to safely kind of bring people into this conversation and make sure that people understand what's really going on here. Because, there's a lot of misinformation on the internet as well. And and I think it's a really hard conversation, because there is a line forming where you're going to have to pick what side of this thing you're on. And that's just kind of the unfortunate circumstance that we're in.
There has to be more than.
And I had heard something about protesting also recently, that it's like, I mean, in the sense of, like, yes, we do need to march, in that, like, the powerful only change things when they become inconvenienced, which is terribly cynical. But also, if, like, they're in a traffic jam too much, they'll start changing the law. You know what I mean? And so that's the whole point of, like, being there and physically inconveniencing these people. I mean, just, like, think about how, I mean, the protesters in Michigan, they're inconveniencing the hell out of everybody. That's how they're enacting getting the eyes they want, because you can the media can ignore anything that happens online, but you can't ignore a fire in the street. You know what I mean? It's like...
Well, I mean, you can interpret, though, because the media can ignore anything that happens within bounds. Right.
That's
but a
true.
Protest is legal, but it happens out of bounds. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the police are trying to control it. It creates contention. You can do it well, but it's not what the system wants to happen. It is the inconvenience.
Right.
So it's about interpreting an inconvenience, right? Like, D. Nice crashed Instagram a few times and everybody celebrated because he got 100,000 people in the same room. And that's a huge deal to me, that 100,000 people came together for joy, you know, for the sake of being together. Right. And if he could do that without a cause, you know, other than joy, like, that's enough of a cause. But now I have I have a need now. Yeah. Not an inspiration, but a need. Someone, like, how do you disrupt, right? You can disrupt the server. You can boycott. It's not, you know, AOC had a great idea in terms of the positive message, taking it to people where they are. Yeah. But if you need to disrupt something, like, I don't want to disrupt Animal Crossing. What do we disrupt, right? The powers that be, like, do we go for a corporation? Do you go for a political institution? Do we try to crash whitehouse.gov? Like, what's...
Right.
And let me add...
And then there's some execution.
And let me add to this headline that... So I read you know, PETA, and I read the AOC thing. But another really interesting thing that's happening on Animal Crossing are Hong Kong protests. And one of the reasons that that's interesting is that it's harder to protest in Hong Kong than it is here right now.
Right.
And so that's one of those examples where taking it to the Animal Crossing platform is a really interesting move, because there's freedom there that doesn't exist on their social media and on their internet.
Wow.
And so it's, you know, it's funny because...
I mean, it is where the people are.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a big part of protest also is to raise awareness in the people. And I think that's totally effective online.
Right. So there you go.
It just seems kind of disrespectful to take that platform, you know, with a message that's so tender. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how to do that yet.
It also just shows that there's really no escaping this stuff, you know? Like... You think you can go play your little, like, 5-year-old game and get out of reality, and next thing you know, you've got people protesting.
Yeah,
it's not like
it's a second life. It's a
Yeah.
life. You've created a universe. You have to deal with that.
yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Now I'm
well,
gonna play the game.
yeah.
You definitely should. It's really fun.
I had one headline that is somewhat it's current and it's very old at the same time. So the headline is Shakespeare in lockdown. Did he write King Lear in plague quarantine? Which was really interesting because I taught a Shakespeare unit for my last thing with the kids and learned that the Globe Theater had to shut down many times due to the plague.
Right.
From like 1592 and then in the early 1600s, and it was more than I had even realized when I looked back today and saw it. I was like, oh, they were actually closed a lot. And there's just some. I was reading in the article, they talk about like all these kind of plague references in King Lear, and the timing of it was like he probably was just sitting around. And it's interesting because it's one of his deeper plays. He had a lot of time sitting around. So it's interesting to think about how artists have been, and theater artists have been operating in quarantine. Because the way that London worked is like once 30 people died of the plague, they would shut everything down. And then like the rich people would leave. And theaters were like some of the first places to get shut down because they were already like socially tenuous. That was kind of interesting, but that's the headline.
To me, that just...
like this rhythm isn't foreign.
Yeah, well, to me, it just kind of like, it shows that there's no excuse as a theater artist. I mean, we've got Shakespeare who's working during quarantine, so can you, That's just how I feel about that.
Yeah.
How do you think he got 39 plays written, man? He's probably sitting at home a lot.
Oh my gosh. Like between the hours of 9 and 3 a.m. Like,
yeah.
That schedule for a while there. When the theaters were open, that schedule was brutal, it seemed.
Yeah.
It is like there's a time for different actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like we haven't really experienced the kind of humility to like taking those cues from nature as a culture yet. But we have as a species. Mm-hmm. Like Shakespeare probably lived during one of these times where you have to take cues from nature. Mm-hmm. And people do in smaller ways. Like I lived around hurricane season and we had to respond. You couldn't just choose not to board up, But that's like you're looking at a day or 2 or 3, and it's enough time that it's fun, and it feels like a sleepover.
Right.
And you might lose power. Like it has a similar. That's my association with like emergency preparedness. It's hurricane season in Florida, and like kind of getting stranded, losing power, needing to secure your water supply. Like survival instinct kicks in. Mm-hmm. And I was a kid, but I also don't remember it having the same. It didn't hit this pitch. It doesn't have the plague rhythm. It's when people would get together and drink and play cards and like not have TV.
Right.
That's what I remember. It's like my grandparents and my parents like gathering around the table, not working more, working less for, you get a little vacation because it's a few days. But this pandemic rhythm is familiar to us as a species, and I think it's workable.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the end of civilization at all, and I don't even think it's bad if we stay in this for a little while. Like I hope, we get a little more freedom. But I also recognize that we've been really spoiled. Like I lived through the 80s and the 90s in a time of economic prosperity, and it was. I'm not like upset about that kind of security and that kind of education and the prosperity that I've lived through. But I also always had this weird like feeling that the environmental situation was shifting. The feeling also that all of our professors were telling us, any science teacher we've ever had, they were telling us. And so there was a disconnect in me on a really deep level, like ever since I was a kid, because I'm a science person by nature. So to see people driving around in cars and hearing what the science teachers were telling me, it felt disconnected. And now, I'm grieving the loss of humanity, but I also suddenly on a very deep level feel that disconnect is now like a little bit resolved. Like we are actually admitting what's going on around us.
Well, some of us are. The stock market isn't.
Some of us are fighting.
But
like in terms of popular understanding. Just the narrative. In terms of the narrative, everyone's pretty much in agreement that there is a pandemic.
Right.
That it's happening. Regardless of like whether they're at risk or what to do about it or the messaging. There's a lot of cynicism about the messaging.
Well, and that's, I think, the biggest thing right now is that it's a strain on our systems. And what we're going to find out is how, strong our systems are, the systems that we have in place. Because
right. And
our ability to communicate, even just across the coasts, has been so destroyed by the misinformation of the internet and, a poor leader as a president and these types of things. And so historically, something that our species may have conquered in the past, now we're doing it with a new system. And the question is, does this system hold up as well as the, what'd you say, 1590 system or the early 1600 system?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's a revisionist period.
Yeah.
We're going to be.
Also, yeah, and London went through it over and over and over and over and over again because they also didn't know, they didn't have the basic scientific knowledge. They had an idea that proximity had something to do with it, but that was about it. There was like the air got bad or whatever, and it just kept coming back. And that,
they had an idea that it was transmittable from person to person. They must have, because they're closing the theaters.
Right, and they knew it would, but they just didn't have the same.
I've got a friend in Kenya, and I talked to him recently about this because Nairobi, Kenya just went into lockdown in the last couple of weeks. And the way that he's looking at it and the way people talk about it out there is they call it a demon. And it's similar to kind of like biblical, like, the spirit that comes to the door and gets through the door even though the door is closed and can get into the house and
invisible.
Or the invisible enemy, as Donald Trump calls it. But
I see in terms of like connecting to the past. I feel some sense of camaraderie in that I already felt like a square peg before life change.
Yeah.
Right. I struggle to fit my processing, my brain processing into the timeline that like a 9 to 5, like a corporate timeline. Some people are better suited for it, I think, than others. And some of that is just about diligence and discipline, but I exercise a lot of that, and I find it easier to perform certain tasks in a corporate environment according to capitalism than others. And I found that the act of creating, it's really hard for me to fit that in around the other things I have to do in a day. Like I really require 8 hours to dig into a project, and takes a lot of resources to put those 8 hours aside. And then it has to happen on that Sunday. Right. Whereas now, like, because I have a little bit of a safety net and no other job, like I have to engage that part of my brain that really can create in the long form and kind of wants to. And I'm not comparing myself to Shakespeare. Like I'm not sitting here writing 39 brilliant pieces of work and $150 on it.
Well, Shakespeare didn't have an iPhone, so
out of that,
not what's happening. But I think that things go in waves now makes sense to me, that certain people prosper, that my extroverted friends are so upset and, very lonely, and I'm doing my best to stay in touch with them. But some of my introverted friends and people who write or people who devise, I feel like devising comes from a similar place with writing. It's like now there's suddenly some peace and quiet and I can get something done. I can read a book.
Yeah.
It takes me a long time to read. There's an in and an out of it for me. I can't just switch that on and off.
Right.
And it's not about the speed at which I read. It's my processing speed.
Yeah.
So
it's the comprehension.
My brain is different now. Yeah, the comprehension and the structuring the day around it.
Yeah.
Is possible in some context. So I feel like in that time, in Shakespeare's time, there was a time to write and there was a time to rehearse, and you had stretches. You had seasons that were longer than 3 months. You had little tiny epochs, and there's something to that. That's all. Like biologically, there's something about that rhythm that works for me.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let's do some plugs. If you have anything that you think the audience needs to know about, you can shout it out right here. It can be
I do.
anything you want.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of things I'm excited about. One of them is Pilobolus, the dance company online. They are active. Well, I say that like they're only online. Right now they're online. They are Brooklyn-based and internationally touring, and this would be their 50th anniversary season tour. and now it's a 50th anniversary season online event that they're going to have. They're super active in terms of education, and I have been really grateful to have a free source of stuff, just like input, because like as a mover and a teacher, I do a lot of output and creating, and it's just so valuable to have teachers. So you can pay for certain things, performances, and you can also get a lot for free. And I think a lot of their they were doing live on Instagram and live Facebook sessions 3 days a week, and they've kept them on their Facebook account. Okay. So Pilobulus is, it's a weird word. I think Pilobus, Pilobulus. Did I miss an O? Maybe.
Gotcha.
You'll find them. It's spelled like it sounds. And they're just very acrobatic, which I like. They're dancers, and they have a certain aesthetic that's evolved over a few, evolutions of the company and the artistic directorship. And you can study with their artistic director. So that's super cool. So that's a major plug. The other, we talked about rope arts, and there is a teacher in town who I think is phenomenal. And his name is Noble S. Monkey. And he recently, like this year, in time for the pandemic, launched his new website. So he souped it up, and now he has monthly subscription, which is very affordable. It's like $17, I think, unless it changed. And he's just a high-level teacher. There's a lot of stuff. If you start Googling and start surfing YouTube, there's a lot of stuff out there. But if you take this recommendation, he's very thoughtful. He's a senior teacher, and he has a lot of expertise. He's a PhD in sciences, so he has influences. He's a tree climber. He's got the climbing part, and he's just a phenomenal artist. So that's the number one resource I can send you to if you want my recommendation. Yeah, awesome. And he's a really great guy, responsible teacher in his community. And the safety video is free, so go watch that. You don't want to pay for stuff. You can go watch the intro stuff. And get the start, get some context, which I think is super important. I'm trying to say the responsible things here. I've said a lot of controversial things.
Cover your bases, man. I got you.
Yeah. And, I want people to see the work I'm doing, but I also have to bring the teacher mind with me because it's circus. Right. Like, they're stunting. It is risky stuff.
Is there anywhere we can see your work online?
Coming up, I'll plug my work in Fuse real quick. So if you follow Fuse, we've become more active on Instagram since we've gone online, and we're also active on Facebook. So that's really where we're at. We have a website too, but for like live stuff, for updates, we're on social media. And since the quarantine project, the Cause Cabaret, which was about a month ago, we decided that we have the software and we know how to use it now. We downloaded all the stuff, and we did the trial run. So we're going to start streaming work. And Rusty, our artistic director and spirit guide and mentor mine, just incredible director, in my life at the moment, has been really encouraging us to produce our own work and has given me a soft deadline of the end of the month. So in a couple days.
Nice.
But the piece I did for the Cause Cabaret was the first movement of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, because it was May 1st. I was like, we got to do this. And you're probably somewhat familiar with the piece as sound people. It's, it's jarring and upsetting. And so I had a great experience moving to it and processing that feeling in my body and in the context of like, what does a quarantine feel like to me? Just responding to the moment. And I wanted to finish it. So I'm going to try to do the second movement and call it a whole piece, readdress the whole and stream that. So Fuse will promote it. It'll appear on our Instagram. We'll say when it's going to happen. So hopefully we'll have it edited and marketed in the next few weeks.
Great.
So that's what I'm working on. And just tune into Fuse because we're doing some disseminating of solo performances next. So there's something I'm working on now, but then Jane Comer has The Fear of Speaking. Rusty Newton-Tennant has The Importance of Being Frank. I've got Tether. Kate's doing online tarot readings and has her own mask show. There's a lot of solos. So as we proceed, we're going to use the Fuse box 1 or 2 at a time and film and stream these. So absolutely. I'm really excited about that frontier. Yeah, I'm really lucky that I have this group that wants to, enter this phase and put work online with me, because I could not do it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are the plugs for the day.
Great. I don't have any.
I've just got I found out that Dante's Inferno is now doing their thing on Zoom. So if you're missing any of your burlesque stuff, you can get your fix there. That's, you know, the longest running burlesque show like anywhere or something, like, you know, all those fire performers, and I've met a lot of those people over the last year or so, and they're all lost all their gigs. So go support them. They are hurting. And so if you want to support some local vaudevillian burlesque performers, check out Dante's Inferno on Sunday nights. Yeah.
Awesome.
Rad. There's some really powerful circus artists in that lineup.
You know, you get all sorts. Yeah, it's really crazy. It's like local people doing silly stuff, and then like world-class performers like doing handstand arrow shooting flaming arrow at a thing. You know, it's like wild. So yeah, it's always a good time. I've never regretted it when I've gone, and the online thing should be cool too.
Awesome.
Yeah, and support those artists who are grounded for the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I plug one more person?
Oh,
I
go for
didn't
it.
say the name of my collaborator. And there's another rope artist. And I said Noble because he lives in town, but I actually had it in my mind. I want to say both these people's names because this guy Marcus in Brooklyn is, you know, in a very similar position to a lot of the artists who 100% full-time artist. So like doesn't have another income if he's not doing work, and just started a Patreon. So I want to send people to the Patreon and just plug Marcus Likes It is his performer name. Marcus is a rope rigger and a lot of other things. He's an opera tenor and now a good friend of mine. And so he and I are in the middle of the Book of J gestation. We've done that fertile ground workshop, and we're hoping to turn the idea into something bigger. So he's now separately, he's doing some video editing of some of the footage that we got while he was in town to try to make little spots and little trailers and tools. Basically, they're just marketing tools. He's not editing the piece. The piece does not exist yet.
Okay.
So he's working on, you know, making us some material, but he's really a beautiful artist. He's a photographer. And if if this work appeals to you, I would seek him out as, you know, any source of like, he's got teaching skills, but right now I think what he's offering on Patreon is his own fine art.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
cool.
if that interests you, go find Marcus Likes It.
Gotcha.
Will do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Didn't want to leave him out. You know, important collaborators.
Cool.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Well, yeah, we'll talk to you
later.
soon. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.